Let's talk about foundations. What would you say is the major difference between a foundation that lasts a really long time and one that won't?
The mix design, your rebar, and soil conditions. Again, if you don't have good soils, no matter how well you pour your concrete, your concrete only can be as good as your soil. But on the flip side too, even if you have great soil, if you don't have good concrete practices, your foundation's not going to last. Again, that also comes with preventative maintenance, waterproofing your concrete, slopage away from your concrete, as well as making sure you're setting up your foundations correctly. You're from the proper rebar, keeping it off the soil, for your proper amount of spacing between bars and stuff in the walls. It all adds up.
Thank you for joining us. We know that your time is valuable and we appreciate you spending it with us.
This show is talking about beyond the blueprint and what happens kind of behind the scenes of the construction world, and also what happens in our lives from a family business and ranching and all the things that keep us building and moving forward.
And if there's something that you heard that resonates with you, whether it was a joke, an idea, please like this, share it with someone you know, and feel free to leave comments. We look forward to seeing what you have to say.
Let's dig in.
Welcome back to the Two Bs in a Podcast. I'm Brad Jans with Jans Corporation, joined again by my brother Brian. Today we're joined by Pat Gerlach of CSU, which is Concrete Solutions Unlimited. Thanks for joining us today, Pat.
Thanks for having me.
So one question, since we're on the record here, can you explain, I hear people say all the time, like, I need new cement. And I always think, you mean concrete? What's the difference between cement and concrete?
Cement, excuse me. Cement is actually an additive in the concrete. It's actually the main ingredient for it. It's actually a kind of a part of what makes up concrete. Concrete's made up of multiple sections. You need water, aggregate, the cement, combine them all together to get concrete.
It's kind of like the powder.
It is. It's the powder that goes inside.
That hardens. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So
cool. Thanks for setting the record straight.
So it's kind of like my cooking. You just take one of each of those things, and just throw it in, mix it up, see if it tastes good, and you're good? Or is there more of a science to it than that?
It might be a little bit more to it than just that, but essentially that's pretty much what it is. So there's different powders, different amounts of admixtures you can put to it to get different strengths, to have it act different ways and stuff like that. So
you need to know what you're pouring, what it's going to be used for,
right.
What all of the ins and outs or what the need of it is before you realize, hey, I got to make a special mix order I need to call in. You don't just call and say, hey, I need some concrete, bring it out to me.
Pretty much. I mean, for like a sidewalk or a driveway, yeah, you could just order like a 4,000 mix. But if it's something you want to set up faster, you might need to. You'd have to switch up the mix, and that they got what's called high early. Some places call it fast tracks, another name for it. It will get you to a strength that where you could drive on it at a faster rate. It's usually more expensive, but then they've got a lot of different aggregates as well. Like a new one they're kind of working on now is to almost like a waterproofing for your concrete. So even for like if you want to pour your driveway, that way water won't penetrate down inside it. So there's a lot of cool stuff that goes into it.
Yeah, cool. So I got to ask this question. Concrete Solutions Unlimited is, part of the family of companies that we have here. So what's it really like when one of the clients you work with may also be your boss?
It's interesting. But it works well. It does. It does work well. We've got a great relationship, great team between Jans and CSU. But we treat Jans, it's like we would treat any other contractor. There's no special favors necessarily. You know what I mean? We live off integrity and quality, regardless of who we're doing the work for. So
core values for CSU are the same core values of Jans Corporation, and that's
right.
Yeah, running a solid, ethical business.
Right.
Very good.
Well, before we get into like more details about the company, the things you guys do, maybe you can tell us just like an opener, what's one of the craziest pours that you've been a part of?
I'd have to say it's probably not necessarily crazy, but it was pretty awesome to do. We dumped out over at the Avalon project. We got our laser screed that does 3D and so we could do parking lots and stuff. And one of the very first pours was we did 180 yards with a valley in it, valley gutter through it, and we were able to dump that out in about just a little over an hour. I mean, the cement trucks, concrete trucks were piled up down the road, and it just, I mean, a little over an hour to do 180 yards, what would have probably taken us 3 hours with our old screed, and doing it a couple different pours. So that was really awesome to see that, how much more you can do with the right tools and equipment, so.
For perspective for everybody listening, what's 180 yards equate to in ready-mix trucks? How many trucks did that take?
It'd be 18.
So they're each carrying 10 yards.
10-yard trucks, yeah. If they're 10-yard trucks, it's going to be 18 trucks. So
It's a lot of trucks.
that's a lot of trucks, yeah.
So Concrete Solutions Unlimited, obviously foundations, parking lots, driveways, stamped concrete, stamped patios, and then also even snow removal. When you can't pour concrete all year round, so snow removal is another thing that you guys do. What all does full service in the construction world mean, and what does it mean for CSU?
From pretty much the start to the end of the project, as far with concrete, we'll come in, do your foundations, your footings, like commercial buildings, you do a lot of interior piers and pads and columns and stuff. We do all that. A lot of your flat work, interior floors, your mezzanines. We'll do curb and gutter, sidewalks, paving, pretty much whatever you can do with concrete on a commercial job, we can do. So.
Well, and you've been involved in the concrete world from all aspects to in the field pouring, setting up, finishing, to now estimating, management side. What's maybe something in the concrete world that the general public or people that aren't involved maybe don't understand about it?
One thing that really can be tricky for people to understand is weather. And it's not just, it's too cold to pour, but it's how it affects the setting up of the concrete, especially on exterior, where you get cool days and you're pouring an interior floor, and if people don't heat the building, you can be there literally all night. I mean, I've started at 7 in the pouring, even with putting a 1-2% calcium, which is an additive to help speed it up, and I'm still there till 5 o'clock the next day, 5 in the morning. To you're outside pouring a simple sidewalk, to wind picks up, it's hot outside, next thing you know, it just sets up really fast, and you're just running to try to keep up with it. That's a big misconception I think a lot of people don't understand, is how much the weather truly does affect concrete and the quality of the concrete.
So the timing of the pour, the finishing,
Right.
and then how a temperature could vary, especially like I think of those fall days where it's,
Right.
high 40s in the morning and it can get up to 80 in the afternoon.
Right. Yeah, and you kind of, after a while of doing it, you understand how long during the different temperatures and when something might take, but there's still no true magical clock that, it's only going to take 2 hours and we'll be done power trail on the floor. You never really truly know, but you'll have, after years of experience, you get a general idea,
Yeah.
So the local weatherman, is he friend or foe?
Most times, friend, but there's a few times when he says it doesn't rain and it does, you're quite frustrated with him.
So inside the family of companies we talked about, and you mentioned a little briefly about working with Jan's Corporation and how that partnership works, but explain a little bit more on how that works outside of the walls of the family of companies. You do work for other companies, other clients, other general contractors. Explain that a little bit on how that operates.
We work with other contractors, or I should say we've had the privilege to work with a lot of other contractors over the years, and we try to build a relationship with them as well, and strive for quality, integrity, and honesty as well. Try to be there when we say they're going to be there. And, obviously in construction that doesn't always happen. Weather can play, especially with concrete, plays a huge part for what we do. Try to give them a good quality product at a reasonable price, and keep that relationship building, because it's really about the relationship than anything. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if someone was going to look at getting a new driveway or a patio this summer, what are some questions that they should be asking that people don't typically ask?
Well, usually it's always, size, dimensions, your basic questions are usually we get asked, and obviously cost, because cost is huge on anything these days, as we all are aware of. But the one thing that never really gets asked is, how do I care for my concrete after it's done being poured? When it's done, we're out of there. That's usually never talked about or mentioned very much. It's starting to do a little bit, but still not really talked about, John. And that comes from sealing all your joints from the, you put construction joints or you'll put control joints in your concrete and stuff, kind of telling it where you want it to crack. You should seal those. You should seal the top. Preventative care. So how do you get the best life out of your concrete for years to come?
So it's not just set it and forget it. There's a process that should be followed to make
Afterwards,
sure you
right.
can prolong the life. Yeah.
Even just simple as making sure you shovel the snow off in the wintertime can actually extend it. You can see that in neighborhoods like where I live. You can see that people who don't shovel, even if they don't use ice melt, but they don't really shovel, it sits on there for a couple of days, gets packed in there, versus the people that shovel right away. Their concrete still looks very new, very good condition. It's not all flaking at the top, spalling and stuff like that. And even if they don't, ice melt's huge, obviously, as well. Not to try not to use ice melt as least as possible, but even just shoveling is a big one that can extend the life of your concrete.
One of the things that I've appreciated that I've always seen you guys do, and you specifically, Pat, too, is when you look at a project and maybe you're doing someone's driveway or you're repairing some concrete in a parking lot, you're looking at things that most people don't, like drainage. You'll see a downspout coming off of someone's garage just pointed in some landscaping between their house and their sidewalk. Can you talk a little bit about why that's important and why that goes along with sealing your concrete? What moisture can do not only on the surface, but more damaging is underneath, what's going on underneath the concrete.
Right. Concrete holds its own strength, but only to a point. And so having a good base underneath it is actually critical. Not as critical as, say, like asphalt, but it can only take so much of a beating, let's say that. When you have your downspouts next to your driveway, if you don't have proper flow away from your driveway, the water is going to go down, it's going to saturate the soil. Well, now it's going to loosen up any gravel that you have underneath there. It's just going to turn to mush, which is going to ruin the strength of the sub base. So what ends up happening when your vehicle goes and it's sitting on there over time, you're just constantly putting the pressure and there's nothing underneath it holding the concrete solid. And that's where you'll start getting settling, the excess cracking and such. The same thing with your foundation around your house. You should always make sure you have proper drainage away from the foundation so that water's not coming back, not just for the concrete's sake, so that way it doesn't seep down underneath into your footing and underneath into your house.
Does concrete grow in the wintertime? I had this old patio in my back door, and every winter it seemed like it raised up like 3 inches up to the bottom of my door. Is it growing, or what's going on there?
That would be from the freeze-thaw cycle. And that's another good point, actually, is why you want to keep moisture away from getting underneath your slab. Is the wetter it is, the more it will heave in the winter. And it will take forever to dry out. So if you can start at the beginning and keep moisture away as much as possible, and the drier that base stays, the better off you will be, and the less heaving you'll actually have.
Right. That's where all the trip hazards come from,
Right.
too, a lot of times.
Yeah.
Frost heat that's forcing that concrete up.
Yeah. I had one house that the driveway had heaved so much, and it pushed up on the trim on the sides of the garage door, and it pushed the siding up, and so it looked like it was smiling across the top of the garage door. And we had to go over there and cut the trim down just to get it to stop, so everything would settle back down until we could fix it in the spring. So,
Well, you talked a little bit about winter care. I know Sioux Falls, we can have nasty winters. Salt is not great, can cause a lot of problems to the surface. What would you recommend for homeowner or a business in lieu of salt? What is a good alternative to try and maximize the life of the concrete?
basically keeping it shoveled. I know it's not feasible, right? You get freezing rain here in South Dakota in the later fall, early spring, but there's really no safe salt. There are some out there that claim to be safer, but it's really there's no guarantee with that. But what you could do is apply a sealer on top of the concrete, and that'll help hopefully. If you do have to use ice melt, because as a business, you can't have ice sitting on your sidewalk. Somebody slips and falls, somebody's going to get hurt. It's a lawsuit, right? So you're going to have to use salt. That's cheaper than paying for somebody that's got a broken leg, right? So, but if you could do anything, I would, caulk all the joints, seal the top, and that way that would at least hopefully help somewhat as opposed to doing nothing to keep that water from, essentially what's happening is the water's getting into the pores of the concrete, and then they freeze, they expand, then they start blowing apart. And then the salt will do the same thing. It actually kind of gets diluted a little bit, turns almost like a salt water, and it creates like a chemical reaction with the cement in the concrete, and it starts breaking it and diluting it and almost weakening its strength. So that's why you start seeing the top flake away, and sometimes I've even seen it like it's like having a powder again on the top of the concrete. So
I know on a couple of our job sites in the winter we use sand, which creates a great anti-slip surface. The problem is it doesn't evaporate, it doesn't go away. So at some point you've got to clean that sand up.
Well, another thing too, when you start using aggregate, it's probably better than salt, but people are walking on it, grind it into the top of your surface, so you're still getting that kind of an effect of
Abrasion.
Right? Correct.
So you talk about sealing. Is that something that you recommend homeowners do themselves or business owners, or is that something that CSU provides as a service? Would you go out and seal
Yeah,
parking lots and driveways?
Right, that is something we do. It actually, for a homeowner, it's actually not hard to do if they have the capability. It's pretty much, there's multiple different products out there you can use. Different vendors here in town carry different products. There's different applications, different ways of doing it, but the gist of it is you're going to want to power wash your driveway or sidewalk, let it dry, and then you just spray it on. Some of them you might need to roll on, depending on what you want. And usually every year or 2 years, it's kind of what you want to go with on most of the products.
Sure. One of the old sayings of concrete is that there's two knowns about concrete. It gets hard and it cracks. Can you talk about cracks? So they're good cracks, bad cracks. When do they get too big? When do they cause problems?
Well, that hasn't changed, unfortunately. That's the purpose of us putting joints in the concrete, is you're trying to tell it where you want it to crack. You're actually putting it there not just where you want it to crack, but it's really where you think it might crack. If you got a sidewalk that wraps around your garage, on something protruding into your concrete, it's generally going to be a spot where it's going to want to crack. So you need to do something. Doesn't mean you get it right, because sometimes it just cracks in odd spots. So concrete cracking isn't necessarily bad. It's when it becomes excessive. And you start getting excessive cracking, it's separating pretty much. So it's just a matter of time. Over time, it's just going to keep failing. It's not going to get better. But if you do have a crack and you say you only got one, what you could do is get a grinding wheel and like a V cup, so it looks like a V on the wheel. You kind of open it up a little bit. You're chasing that crack to open it up, and then you can seal that crack. So what you're doing there is you're trying to prevent moisture from getting inside that crack and making your crack bigger. Plus, the water is going to go, flows down. So it's going to want to get into the base and saturate the base.
So cracks can be formed from a lot of different things, right? It can be sub-base, whatever was done underneath, and that movement can create cracking, but also could be a bad mix design, or the concrete could have came wrong from the plant, or maybe it was placed inappropriately too.
Correct. Yeah, there's multiple reasons why concrete can crack. There's actually things you can do inside the mix of the concrete to help eliminate some of it. You're never going to eliminate it all, unfortunately, but you can help reduce it. And then the techniques you use, from how you pack gravel to how you pour in the different weather conditions you pour in, also play effect on cracking and spalling and all that as well.
Would something like a rebar, a wire mesh, or a fiberglass mesh, did that reduce cracking at all?
It can help, but it's not going to stop it and prevent it from cracking. But what it will do is it will hold it together when it does crack. So hopefully you don't get separation. That's why on like driveways and stuff, on exterior stuff that's not necessarily a structural, I will try to tend to push towards your fiberglass bar, different stuff like that, not rebar, because rebar over time rusts, where the fiber stuff doesn't, and it's actually that fiber bar's got good tensile strength or whatever to it. So I would lean more towards that with a homeowner than I would rebar. Also, you can get by with a 3/8 once, you can get better coverage around that bar. But when you're talking foundations and structural, you can't use that fiberglass bar for stuff like that, and it just won't hold up quite as well.
So 2-part question, getting back to like the commercial side for a building or a business owner, where are 2 areas that you see maybe a business owner overspends something concrete they didn't need to, or where is a spot you see they maybe cut corners where the money should be put?
I'd have to say curing. Curing is a big one, whether it's interior or exterior. You usually don't see much about curing. It's starting to a little bit more, but typically people don't want to spend the money to properly cure concrete. It's not talked about very much. More people are starting to talk more about it, but it is a big cost. You know, you used to see it once in a while, the old burlap in the water, so hosing it down. What you're trying to do is slow it down a little bit so that it doesn't dehydrate. Essentially, part of the curing process, the moisture is getting out of the concrete. But you don't want it to go out too fast. That's where you start getting shrinkage cracks on the surface. Those aren't necessarily a structural thing, more can be kind of a cosmetic. But you're trying to eliminate as much as you can. So curing's really a big one that you just don't see. Because again, it can get kind of spendy depending upon the methods you use. Luckily, there are different cures you can put on concrete now that are spray, and we usually do that ourselves just as a precaution, especially on exterior, is we just cure it. There's clear cure, there's a white pigmented cure you can use. That method isn't as expensive. And it still works. Does it work maybe as well as the burlap water method, keeping it hosed down, saturated? Probably not, but it still works. It still helps. It's better than nothing. So we usually do that ourselves, regardless if our contractors unless. No, I take that back a little bit, because on interior floors, when you cure them, that can screw up flooring. So you got to be careful on that aspect. You don't want to use it on interiors just willy-nilly, because
You're saying for a finished floor you'd put over the top?
Yeah,
Carpet or
different
tile.
different glues and stuff won't. It depending upon the cure you use, won't bond well to the concrete with different hardeners or sealers and stuff. So you kind of got to watch that. But most of your exterior stuff, we cure it with the wet cure. Just so.
I know one of those big issues when you don't cure it right, especially like in an interior slab where you're pouring big pours like that, 180 yards that we're talking about earlier. The word I always remember hearing is curling, and it's not the broom and the puck, that big Olympic sport we all like to enjoy watching. It's really the corners of the concrete curling up because the chemical reactions taking the moisture out too quickly.
Right, exactly. And they actually have different mixtures to help prevent that, like on bigger interior, especially interior floors. Again, I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but there's that is very expensive, but it helps eliminate the curling process. So that way you don't get so much deviation in height, because as it curls, concrete can shrink a little bit and stuff. So you can get you can mess with the elevation, especially on larger pours like the 180 out there at Avalon and stuff. That does play an effect on there.
Well, and a lot of, technology is these days, a lot of manufacturing facilities and warehouse facilities use robotic equipment that they need to have a pretty flat, low tolerance floor that, a lot of pieces go into that to make sure that you've got a floor. You talk about like a laser screed, using technology on your own side to help improve that process and make things more precise.
Right.
When I was in high school, I remember, pouring some foundation walls, and there was a tool that the foreman grabbed out of the trailer to help with the foundations, to help voids, from forming, so get the concrete. What was that tool called?
Oh, the vibrators.
Yeah. In high school, it was pretty fun to talk about that, but explain that process maybe.
It's essentially it's getting any air out of it, air pockets, I should say, because exterior concrete will have air entrainment into it, but you're kind of consolidating it, moving it around, filling through rebar properly, and making sure you can consolidate it properly is really what it's doing. Getting any voids out.
You're having a bad day when you pull a form off a wall and there's a big hole.
Seen it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's not good.
So, to that point, I guess there's lots of different ways it can be mixed, from really thick, and slump test gets into testing, kind of the concrete's mix, to pretty thin or almost liquid-like concrete. But yeah, I remember too doing some foundation walls and getting Brian's favorite tool out and seeing that vibration just shakes it up enough that it settles, and it settles to the point any air voids are kind of shaken out of it.
Right. And essentially that's what you want, but you don't want to overdo it either, because you can over consolidate it, and that can create other issues as well. It's knowing more than just you're just up and down, just keep going. There is kind of a deal where you just kind of got to pay attention. It's pretty hard to overdo it, but you can overdo it. But it seems so simple, but that can make a big difference in quality of the product at the end.
Yeah, we're actually separating the components. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another funny story. I remember being in college, and we had a young kid who'd never been on a job site before, and one of the foremen asked him to go in the trailer and get the bull float, and we were all standing around, and he asked another guy on the site, "Have you seen the Flobo? I don't know where the Flobo is." Totally misunderstood what he was looking for. Didn't know what it was anyway.
Bet he was looking for a while.
One of the things that I think sets Concrete Solutions Unlimited apart from other concrete companies is the people and the skill that they put into pouring concrete. Obviously we talked about the science of it, the mix, but it's also an art. It's an art form of how you place it, how you finish it, and cure it out. I remember hearing stories, being on other job sites. I was in Colorado for a while, and when the workers were tired and didn't want to really work with the concrete as much, they just kept adding water. Every concrete truck has a hose and say, "Hey, put more, put 3-4 more gallons of water in there." What does that do to the end result, and why is that not a great idea?
Yeah, that was I've been doing concrete for going on 23 years now, and that was when I started, that was kind of a common thing. But as time gone on, practices have changed, and what that does, it dilutes. Pretty essentially, you're diluting your concrete.
Changing the mix.
You're changing the mix, But over the years, they've created different things that you could pour it what would seem too wet, but it's actually not ruining your strength, because that's essentially what you're doing is you're ruining the strength. Once you hit over a certain slump, whether it's 5 or 6, you're starting to lose integrity, and then you're asking for excessive cracking possibly. Not saying it will, but there is that chance where you can get excessive cracking. Then the spalling can be bad, and you're not getting the strength that you should pouring it under, say, a 5-inch slump. But you don't want it too dry either, because it needs to be semi-flowable, and you need to be able to work with it. Let's be real. I mean, at a 1-inch slump, nobody wants to mess with that.
Don't want exposed aggregate on a hard finish.
Right.
One of the things I think that really rang true in that, about 4 or 5 years ago, there was something that changed in the ready mix plants around here, and they didn't tell anybody. And a lot of concrete started spalling, or the top started breaking up in pieces. And I got a lot of calls about that, and it wasn't from the concrete that we poured, that Concrete Solutions poured, but it was people who had other people pour concrete for them, and they were arguing, and there was some turmoil about that. Can you explain a little bit? Maybe there's some people out there that still like, "Oh yeah, my driveway, in a year it was all spalled out." Can you explain a little bit about what that was all about and why our concrete didn't seem to do it?
Well, again, that comes back to the water. Obviously COVID happened, and it was hard to get materials, so concrete suppliers had to outsource different powders, the cement again that makes up your concrete, a portion of it. They had to get different aggregates. They had to the additives that go into it, not necessarily the aggregates, but the different additives. So the mix itself, the strength never changed, but some of the stuff they had to add to it was different than usual. So if you're used to pouring it super wet, that's could create future even bigger problems for you down the road. And for us, we just didn't pour it that wet. We never, a 5 is about the max we pour, and majority of our stuff, that's what it's spec'd at anyways. But even if it's not a spec job, we try not to ever pour over a 5 unless we're using like a super, or a water reducer, we'll say that. but there again, it's also a curing thing. Just that 5-gallon pail of cure goes a long ways and can help a lot down the road. I think a lot of that was probably more on the practices of how it was poured and probably not curing. And the combination of that and the different additives that the concrete suppliers had to use, the combination of all that, I think, created a mess for a lot of folks.
So, concrete versus asphalt. See what your favorite is, and in a parking lot, what's the difference in lifespan between a concrete parking lot versus an asphalt parking lot?
I'd going to go with concrete. I'd be just.
I was wondering if you were going to say that or not.
I can't give you exact numbers, but what I can tell you one thing is I've done more asphalt repairs over the years where we come in, take out a section's asphalt, replace it with concrete than I have having to come in and repair somebody's concrete work. Not that concrete never needs repairs, right? But it just seems to be more common with asphalt. And where a big problem I've seen is in parking lots where the front tires sit along either curb and gutter or thickened edge sidewalk, because asphalt isn't bad, but it doesn't have the integrity like concrete does to span its own strength or to span itself. Concrete can actually act like you see a bridge, right? You got concrete and there's other supports in there that goes into it, but concrete will hold up, whereas when the front tires park on that, asphalt just gives. Asphalt's only as good as the base, period. Like, it has to have a solid base. You need stronger compaction numbers. There's no give where you could have a void start underneath the concrete, a little bit of a void, and that concrete will still span and still stay. So to me, you're going to get longer. You should get longer life out of your concrete than asphalt. Exact numbers I couldn't tell you, but I'd almost say double it, especially if you're taking care of it.
Right, sure.
Proper drainage, sealing, all that stuff. It should get you a lot longer life than you'll ever get out of asphalt.
Yeah, especially, we've seen, obviously, our environment here in South Dakota, we can see, 100 plus degree
Right.
temperature, and you can see that create a reaction with the asphalt that starts softening it up and things start sinking in.
Yeah, it just, like Marion Road a few years ago, that one winter was so bad because it was cracked all over and everything just started heaving. So it was literally just doof, 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 doof all the way down the road.
Sure.
And it's asphalt. It doesn't hold its own weight, I guess you might say. So
Yeah, I remember several times parking a motorcycle in a parking lot on a hot day and the kickstand just sinks in. Oh, it's going to be a problem.
makes you pucker up a little bit, wondering if it's going over.
Maybe we can do a little kind of true false MythBusters. Tell us about pouring concrete in the winter. Yes, no?
If done right, you can. I mean, it takes usually, I'm not close to twice as long. It's very expensive, but it can be done. You need ground heaters, blankets. You've got to cover the concrete after you pour it for, I usually leave it covered for 5 to 7 days. Everything takes longer in the winter, but it can be done. There's still a certain temperature that it's just too cold to pour in. Even if your temperature isn't that cold, but by the time you factor in a windshield, your concrete will freeze on you as you're finishing, So and then if you got an interior floor and it's heated, that's fine. There's a lot more tools out there now that make it a possibility to pour in the winter. It's just it's very expensive. Let's just say that.
You have to weigh the consequences. Is it worth
Right.
pouring it now to get it done, or try to wait for warmer weather in the spring? Because, like I say, even though a chemical reaction is happening creating heat, it can still freeze, especially on the surface.
Right.
That's why putting a blanket over it's enough, maintains that heat inside.
Right.
How about, does concrete continue to get stronger forever?
No. No, it does not. After your 28 days, you initially hit your cure time, and then, the next couple of years, you might get a little more strength to it, but eventually it just kind of caps out. And actually, if you think about it, over 30 years, it might have even
Gone backwards a
little bit.
I think the way it cures is the strength it gains is
Yes.
exponential, right? You get a lot of it right away within the first 24 hours.
Right.
It still continues to cure and get harder, but it slows down. Like, how often do you do testing to find out if the concrete you just poured is good? You know, what are those? What's that? You know, time frames
Process.
that you,
Yeah. So typically, if it's a sidewalk, we usually don't test that. But your interior floors, paving, we like to do what's called cylinders. Well, we have a third party come out there. They take the test. Right. Typically, they'll do one at 7 days, 21 days, and then 28 days. And it all varies. And you can have them take 3, 4, 5. You could say, hey, I need you to, say you're looking at doing a fast track mix and you want to drive on it 2 days. Hey, I need you to take extra samples of this. I need you to, at day 2, break this, see if it's at the strength I need so we can drive on it.
Sure.
So you can adjust that however you want. Typical on a pour, they'll do the first load, and then every 50 after that, they'll test every 50th load. And they'll test for air, they'll test for slump, which is obviously how wet it is. Mm-hmm. And then they keep their cylinders, and then they'll break them as you need them. Sure.
So stamped concrete lasts forever, or is it a problem?
All in maintenance. It all goes back to maintenance. If the base is good, you keep water away from getting underneath your slab, you seal the top, it'll last a long time. It's just like regular concrete, you know. It's got a lot of the same properties other than you might add color to it. You know, the stamping doesn't necessarily affect the integrity of the concrete. It's just, again, maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
Hairline cracks. Does that mean that the contractor screwed up?
Not necessarily. I will say not necessarily. It can. There's a lot that goes into just saying that's really not a. It's hard for me to say yes or no. There's a lot more that goes into it because you can find one instance, well, yeah, that's obviously a contractor issue, and you can find another one and be like, it should never crack there. Mm-hmm. You know, even a hairline. You know, it's kind of open ended, I guess.
Could be mixture. Could be a lot of different variables. Could be the subgrade underneath.
Right.
So sealers are optional.
If you don't want to extend the life, yes.
Is a thicker slab always a better slab?
I'd have to say, again, that's kind of open-ended because it depends upon the application. What would be the point of having an 8-inch thick driveway when most people do 4? What are you going to gain from it, right? Now, going from a 4 to maybe a 5 or 6, okay, you should hopefully get, again, that goes back to the maintenance part and stuff. So thicker isn't always better. It can be a waste, I guess.
Sure.
You know, it's not needed.
Thicker usually means it's more stronger. However, it may not be the best value.
It's not the best value, yeah.
What's the most underrated concrete project you've ever finished? One that you were really proud of and nobody ever gave you the good job, Pat. You should be proud of that one.
It's kind of a catch-22 because it was like the most boring, most tedious.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the same time, you're back, you're like, can't believe that's finally done. It was the blast wall at the Henkel building in Brandon.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was the longest pour I've done for 6 yards. My gosh. So it was a block wall. They slugged it, except for the top row. And then we had to slug it with concrete after the masons were done, but it was on the bottom of an I-beam. And we had to, not just I-beam, they also had bar joists that connected over. So we had to notch out around every single one with framing material on the backside to keep the concrete in, plus frame up on the other side, but not too far that I could still squeeze in like a 1-inch hole to try to get my concrete to fill inside and somehow get a vibrator in there to consolidate everything to make sure it all flowed properly. I mean, we spent days forming that, and you look back and it gets painted and walk away.
Never gets seen again.
Never gets seen again.
Yeah.
So,
Do you have a favorite pour or something that turned out absolutely amazing and it'll outlive all of us?
Majority of interior floors are going to outlive us that we've done, that most people do, unless you purposely go in and tear something out. It's majority of them will. favorite pour. I don't know. I enjoy like paving. I really enjoy paving. That's, you're not necessarily stuck there all night finishing or late in the day, but I do enjoy also power throwing though, especially a rider, getting on one of those and going across the floor and stuff. It's,
Crack a beer and just.
well, maybe back in the day, it's kind of frowned upon now.
Right.
When you're on a family vacation and you're out traveling, most people are enjoying the scenery. Are you paying attention to the thumping on the road of the wheels bouncing off of
Yes.
cracks? Or
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what your attention relies on?
Yeah, the road conditions and just even walking, I find myself looking down more so than up. Wife's like, "What are you looking at?" Don't worry about it.
Pays to be an introvert when you're looking at your shoes and you can see concrete.
Right. Yeah,
That's great.
so
So maybe for someone planning concrete work in the next year, when would be the right time to give you a call?
now waiting, it's just the costs seem to be going up slightly every year. Seems like I'm always getting a price increase on the concrete materials. You never know. Maybe they go down. I wouldn't bank on it. So if it's something you want to do, I would do it sooner than later because, like everything else, prices just keep going up. Costs just keep going up. How much? Who knows? So I would say if you're something you want to do it sooner than later.
Sure. From a timing standpoint of the year, is it better to start planning like winter, early spring to get it done in the summer?
Me, myself, if I was going to, say, redo my own driveway, I would do it probably earlier or later spring, all the way up to, I try to keep it as far away from the ice, snow season as you can. Just give it more cure time so it can handle those harsher conditions a little bit better is what I would do and recommend people. Not wait till the last minute to try to get it in because, in order to seal some of that too, it also needs to maintain a certain temperature. So sure, we can pour it, but you might not be able to throw a salt sealer on there. And now you have fresh concrete going into winter, driving on it. Yeah.
So say somebody listening decided, hey, you know what, our driveway is a wreck and we could use a new one, and they call you right away. What would be the time frame that you guys could be out there tearing out the old and putting the new in?
Right now we're out a couple weeks, but we could get in there fairly quick. We've got some openings here and there throughout the summer.
So roughly 2 weeks. Somebody called 2 weeks, and is
Yeah.
a driveway of a 3-stall garage house, is that a 3-day, 4-day turnaround? What's
Tear
that?
out and replace. You're going to be looking at probably a day to tear it out and a couple days get it set up, prepped, ready to pour, all that. So you're probably looking at a 3-day turnaround. But the kicker is you also need to wait 5 to 7 days to drive on it, unless you want to do spend the extra money and do a fast track.
Sure.
So there's different things we can do there to help.
Yep.
Whether you want to tear out just half of it, do half, and then come back once that's cured, and then tear out the other half. There's ways to work around that. So.
And if somebody wanted to reach out, get a proposal, whether it was for their house, for their business, where could they find you or get a hold of you?
Well, we have a website, Concrete Solutions, and then also you can get a hold of me, reach me myself. Do you want me to give my phone number? Or?
Sure, if you want to. For a good time, call Pat.
That's probably not a good idea.
For a hard time.
Yeah. If you want to get bored, here, call me.
What's one thing every homeowner or business owner should know about their concrete? What's one thing they should do every year at least to maintain and create longevity within their concrete?
I think it all goes back to maintenance. It goes back to making sure you have proper slopage, drainage away from it, away from your house, driveway. Downspouts, very critical. Not like if you had a building and you have, you see it a lot on the new buildings where they'll have landscaping in between their sidewalk and the foundation where the water has no place to go but down, and then it saturates underneath the sidewalk. So, really it's drainage and caulking your joints, sealing the top. Just that preventative maintenance stuff can actually help the life of the concrete last a lot longer than just doing nothing.
Right. One of the cool things with concrete is it lasts for a very long time. A lot of people like to put their handprint, or if you're Michael Scott, your face print. Do you do that? Have you seen that done on projects?
Oh, yeah.
Are there Pat handprints along all over Sioux Falls?
Well, not all over, because most business owners don't want my handprint in there. But we've done that for homeowners and stuff where they want to put their handprint in there, so we accommodate for stuff like that, kid stuff, initials. So, we've seen some pretty cool stuff. We did a baseball diamond, a memorial one. We put a plaque in the concrete. The parents were there and stuff for that. That turned out
actually
really well.
Cleats, wasn't there?
Cleats,
cleat
yes,
imprint
there
from the
was.
Cleats. Yeah.
Yep. So that turned out really nice. It was a pretty cool deal we did there.
Absolutely.
So,
Well, Pat, thank you for your time joining us today on the podcast. Appreciate all you do for CSU, and we'll see you out there on the job site.
it's been my pleasure. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Pat. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you.
We appreciate you listening. Everything we do is a collaboration, and we appreciate you being here to share this with us.
Yeah, our goal is always the same, to build relationships, to build structures, and to tell the stories that we've experienced along the way.
Feel free to drop us a comment, share it with a friend, and like this podcast.
Or call me if you just want to talk about cows.
So until next time,
Keep building. No, get out of here.